There's a peculiar sentence whispered in many ancient traditions, and yet almost no one pauses long enough to understand it. It says, "To live fully is to die before you die." Now, at first hearing, this sounds like a contradiction, perhaps even a riddle wrapped in something unsettling. But stay with me, for beneath these words lies one of the most liberating realizations you will ever touch. Have you ever noticed how much of your life is spent trying not to die? Not just physically, though we do cling fiercely to the body, but inwardly. You cling to your identity, terrified it might change. You cling to your beliefs, afraid they might be wrong. You cling to your achievements, frightened they might be forgotten. You cling to your carefully crafted image, praying it doesn't crack. And all this clinging, this tightening, this attempt to preserve yourself gives birth to a strange paradox. The more you resist death, the less you truly live. Life becomes a constant rehearsal, a constant defense, a constant gripping at the edges of what you believe keeps you safe. But what if safety is not where life is? What if the fullness of being, the vibrant, spontaneous, luminous presence of existence, waits on the other side of letting go? You see, there are two kinds of death. There is the death of the body, the one we all know is coming, and then there is the death of the false self, the death of the rigid me you've been polishing, defending, performing. It is the second death, the dying before dying, that opens the gates to life. And it does not arrive through tragedy. It arrives through clarity. Let me give you an image. Imagine standing beside a river. The water flows, continues, never repeats itself. You stand on the bank trying to capture a single handful, grasping tightly so that the moment will stay. But the tighter you close your fist, the faster the water escapes. Now imagine relaxing your hand. Open palm, no grasping, no forcing, and suddenly the water lingers. It plays between your fingers. It stays for a moment before continuing its dance. This is what it means to die before you die. It means opening the hand, opening the heart, opening the rigid walls of who you think you are. Because who you are is not something that can be held. It is something that can only be experienced. Yet most people spend their lives enshrining themselves in a psychological museum. They preserve their identity like glass artifacts. This is who I am. This is what I believe. This is my story. And then they guard it, defend it, polish it, terrified that life might rearrange the shelves. But my dear friend, life is the rearranging of the shelves. And the more fiercely you protect your museum, the more brittle your existence becomes. To die before you die is to allow the museum to burn and discover that you were never the artifacts inside, but the space in which all things come and go. A space cannot be harmed. A space cannot be lost. A space cannot die. This is why letting go feels like death, because the thing that dies is the illusion of control, the illusion of solidity, the illusion of being a separate, permanent, unchanging me. You have lived so long inside these illusions that dropping them feels like stepping off a cliff. And yet when you finally fall, you discover something extraordinary. There is no ground to hit. There is only freedom. But perhaps you think, if I let go of who I am, what will remain of me? What if nothing is left? Ah, and there's the secret. Only nothing can be free. Only emptiness can dance. Only a self that has died can truly live. Letting go is frightening only when you believe you are what you hold. Imagine a bird gripping a branch so tightly it refuses to fly. It believes the branch is safety. But flight, the very purpose of the bird, requires release. If the bird never lets go, it spends its entire life perched, never discovering the sky that has always belonged to it. Humans are the same. You cling to who you are and wonder why you cannot become what you long to be. To live fully is to release your branch. Let me tell you something even more curious. Every moment of your life is already dying. The breath you just took will never return. The thought you just had will never be repeated. The person you were this morning is already gone. But rather than mourning this death, life celebrates it. The cherry blossom is beautiful precisely because it falls. The sunset is breathtaking because it fades. A melody moves your heart because it ends. Impermanence is not the enemy. It is the reason beauty exists. To die before you die is to align yourself with this truth so deeply that you no longer cling to the temporary, no longer fear the changing, no longer resist the flow of becoming. You surrender to the river, and in that surrender, something miraculous happens. You begin to live in the present, not as a practice, not as a discipline, not as a spiritual technique, but as a natural consequence of being free from what no longer exists. To live fully is to die to the past, to die to who you were, to die to the story you keep telling about yourself. And when those stories die, you are not diminished, you are expanded. You become vast as the sky that holds every cloud, as open as the ocean that holds every wave, as free as the wind that moves without a map. This is the quiet miracle of dying before you die. You lose nothing real and gain everything that was waiting. If you have begun to taste this truth, even faintly, you may feel a strange lightness inside you, a softness, a loosening of something that had been clenched for years without your awareness. This is the beginning of inner death, not a darkness, not an ending, but a gentle dissolving. Like ice melting into water, it is the death of rigidity, the death of resistance, the death of the small self that believed life was something to be managed rather than experienced. And with this death comes an unexpected birth. A life lived directly. Most people do not live directly. They live through filters, through opinions, fears, comparisons, expectations. Like someone watching the world through thick colored glass, they never quite see things as they are. They see only what they expect to see, what they fear to see, what they hope to see. But when the false self dies, the glass cracks. Reality pours in. The world becomes vivid. Colors sharpen, sounds deepen. Even ordinary moments shimmer with a kind of aliveness you had forgotten. A cup of tea becomes a ceremony. A walk becomes a pilgrimage. A breath becomes a revelation. It is not because the world has changed. It is because you have died. The you that stood between yourself and life. Let me give you an image. Imagine a famous musician who has spent years performing flawlessly on stage. Every note, precise, every gesture, rehearsed. But then one day he sits alone at a piano in an empty room. No audience, no expectations, no identity to uphold. He plays not to impress, not to succeed, but simply because the music wants to move through him. That is what life feels like when the ego dies. It becomes music again, not performance. You are not trying to win. You are not trying to become someone. You are not trying to uphold the statue of who you think you should be. You are simply responding, like a tree responding to the wind, like a wave responding to the moon, like a flame dancing in the presence of air. People often ask, but if I let go of who I am, how will I live? How will I make decisions? How will I maintain structure? They do not yet realize structure is not lost. Clarity is not lost. Responsibility is not lost. What dies is the tension around these things, the belief that you must exert immense effort to hold your world together. But the world is not held together by your effort. Gravity does not depend on your opinion. The sun does not rise because you set an alarm. Your heart beats without your permission. Life is already happening. When you die before you die, you stop trying to steer the universe with the fragile rudder of your ego. You participate instead of control. You cooperate instead of command. And in that cooperation, life becomes unexpectedly effortless. Not because challenges disappear, but because resistance disappears. The river of your being is no longer dammed by fear. Now let's look more closely at fear. That ancient companion. Fear is the guardian of the false self. It whispers, if you stop holding on, you will be nothing. If you stop controlling, chaos will swallow you. If you allow yourself to die, you will cease to exist. But awakening reveals the stunning reversal. It is fear that keeps you from existing fully. It is fear that prevents life from touching you. It is fear that maintains the small cage in which you pace, imagining walls that were never there. Death, the inner death, is not the end of existence. It is the end of fear's rule. Consider this. Have you ever had a moment when you truly surrendered? Perhaps during deep grief, or great beauty, or overwhelming love. A moment when you stop fighting and simply let yourself be undone? There is a sacredness in that undoing, a holiness in that cracking open. Because in that surrender, something quiet emerges, a presence untouched by fear, untouched by time, untouched by loss. A presence that observes all things, but clings to nothing. That presence is what remains after you die. Not the body, not the story, not the identity, but the raw, open awareness behind it all. To die before you die is to recognize this presence while you are still alive. And once you recognize it, everything changes. Relationships change. Because you no longer try to possess people or demand that they save parts of you you're unwilling to let die. You love without gripping. You give without keeping score. You forgive without dragging the past behind you like a heavy chain. Work changes because you stop performing for approval and start creating from authenticity. You contribute instead of compete. You express instead of impress. Even suffering changes. It does not vanish. No one is spared the waves. But you stop believing the waves are personal. You stop turning pain into identity. You stop drowning in what is meant to pass. You float. You breathe. You allow every experience to flow through you like weather moving through the sky. Because now you know, you are the sky. There is a beautiful irony to dying before you die. You become more alive than ever, more spontaneous, more present, more tender, more fearless in your love and more honest in your living. Most people live like someone trying to protect a candle from the wind. You, once you die, become the wind. And here is the deepest point of all. When you die before you die, you stop asking life to make you immortal. You stop begging for guarantees. You stop searching for perfection. You stop thinking you must fix yourself in order to deserve existence. You see that life in all its impermanence is enough, more than enough. A miracle that never needed your control, only your willingness to experience it. To die before you die is to dissolve into this miracle. It is to laugh softly at how hard you tried to hold the river still. It is to forgive yourself for not knowing that water is meant to flow. It is to bow to the sheer mystery of being here at all. And in that bow, that quiet surrender, you live. There comes a moment after all the grasping and resisting when you finally see what has been true all along. You were never meant to hold life. You were meant to move with it. To die before you die is simply the recognition that everything you cling to, every identity, every belief, every fear, is already dissolving. And strangely, this is not a tragedy. It is liberation. It is the opening through which real life enters. When the false self dies, what remains is not emptiness, but spaciousness. Not a void, but a clarity. You begin to notice that awareness, the simple presence of being, does not come and go the way thoughts and emotions do. It is always here, quietly witnessing the dance. This presence is who you are beneath the shifting costumes. And once you taste it, even for a moment, the world softens. Not because life becomes easier, but because you stop demanding that it be anything other than what it is. The river flows, and instead of damming it, you float. You breathe, you allow. People come and go, but you do not cling. Opportunities rise and fall, but you do not chase. Moments appear and dissolve, but you do not mourn their passing. You participate fully while holding lightly. This is the paradox of living after you've died. And something else emerges, a gentleness. You no longer treat yourself as a project to fix. You no longer treat others as threats or trophies. You no longer measure your worth by the weight of your successes or the shadows of your mistakes. You see that life is not a problem, it is a process, a movement, a melody that cannot be frozen without killing its beauty. To die before you die is to finally trust this movement, to trust that you are carried, to trust that you are part of something vast and intelligent, to trust that letting go does not mean losing, but returning to the deeper, quieter truth that has always been here. Death, the inner death, reveals that you were never the wave you were clinging to. You were the ocean holding it. And the moment you realize this, a soft smile spreads through your being. A smile not of triumph, but of understanding. A smile that whispers, "Ah, so this is what it means to be alive." You live now without the old fear, without the old defenses, without the old story tightening around your chest. You live with the ease of someone who knows that everything rises and falls, appears and disappears, and that nothing, not even loss, can touch the truth of what you are. And so, having died, you finally live, fully, freely, fearlessly.